Mandy has been working in the wine trade for over 14 years and now works with wine to make wine more accessible. And here are Ben and Mandy going to discuss what wine they chose and why they chose it.
Cheers. Okay, so we have just finished our Sunday lunch on Easter Sunday, and we had lamb with some seasonal vegetables, and we thought we would talk a little bit about the wine that we had with it and why we chose it. Mandy, can you tell us what the wine was?
Yeah, so I decided to open a Le Duc Viognier for our roast today.
And it's a white wine.
It is a white wine, yes, so pretty unusual with lamb, or some people might think.
Yeah, I was quite surprised that we didn't have a red, like you say, with lamb. That seems the more normal choice. What was behind your thought there?
So it's a beautiful day. I hope you've all had a nice day. It's a bit sunny, and I thought that red might have been a bit heavy, and I wanted something to kind of lift the meal a little bit and think about the vegetables as well as just the meat. So I thought that this white in particular would work well for that.
Okay, so I don't know an awful lot about wine, so I thought if we go through the bits of the label and then you can help me understand what they all mean and sort of, again, help me understand why we chose this one compared to another white, for example. So, like you say, it's a Viognier, which is the grape, I want to say.
It is the grape, yes. So there are lots of different grape varieties out there, just like there are different apples, for example, and each will give you slightly different characteristics. So Viognier is a grape that gives you a little bit more of a kind of riper, fruitier sort of aroma and flavour. So
compared to sort of what's the other end of that?
So the other end would be if it tastes more citrusy, for example. So your kind of classic Pinot Grigios have a lot more of the kind of, I suppose, fresh bursts of fruit, whereas this one tastes, what some people say is a bit sweeter, but actually we'd like to say a bit riper, so we don't get confused between it still being what we call a dry wine.
Okay, so yeah, it is. Yeah, I can see why people get confused because it has a taste. It's almost sweet, but it's still a dry wine when you have it.
Yeah, your brain will play funny tricks on you. So if you can taste peaches, then you're automatically going to think, because a peach, the actual fruit has sugar in it, that you might be tasting something sweet with sugar. But in actual fact, most wines, especially the ones we drink with main courses, don't have sugar in them. They are what we call dry. So it's a dry wine, but it's got a much fruitier or riper fruit profile.
Okay, and then underneath that it says Pays d'Oc, which you said. So that's the area where it's from, is it?
Yes, so the area, the Pays d'Oc, the country of the south of France. It's quite a large area, so they're allowed to grow lots of different grape varieties, which is why they are allowed to grow Viognier. It kind of originates a little bit further north from a place called the Rhone Valley. They have many more kind of rules there as to how they're allowed to grow their grapes and make their wine. But in the south of France, in the Pays d'Oc, it's a really good area for picking up some of these riper flavoured whites.
And yes, and then obviously we've got that it's 2018. So this is, what would that be, 18 months old, 2 years old now?
Yeah, so that's the year that we pick the grape. Okay, so obviously it's gone through harvest, we've picked it in that year. That's going to be September time, so September or November. So we then would make the wine, turn those grapes into wine in that kind of later or latter part of the year. And because we then change into 2019 quite quickly, it's still considered quite a young wine. This wine wouldn't have had any oak involvement, and by putting wines into oak barrels we can sometimes pick up some flavours from the wine touching the oak, but this one is unoaked, so it's all about the kind of the fruit as we were talking about before, so it's a nice young fresh wine.
And is it one that you knew that you had before, or was this your first time?
Yeah, I've had it a few times before. I think it's a nice easy drinking sort of slightly riper summer wine.
So as a grape, is this a grape that you have in other places? Because I know ones you've told me about before with like the Pinot Grigio have different names in different countries. So does this come from anywhere else?
So it is grown in lots of other places around the world. It actually really only grows well in warm places. So we'll be looking at kind of Australia. We'll be growing quite a lot of it in the warmer places, and possibly a bit of South Africa.
And always called the same name.
But it's always going to be called Viognier, yeah. Whereas, as you were saying, yes, Pinot Grigio can be called Pinot Gris, and Syrah can be called Shiraz, but Viognier is always going to have the same name or pronunciation, even though it's got a G in it, which is, people think that it's called Viognier, but it's very different.
Viognier.
Viognier, that's it. Yeah, pronunciation's a funny one. I think everyone should just go with how they see it's pronounced, but however you pronounce it, Viognier or Viognier.
Probably easier to Google if you're looking up Viognier.
Yes,
if you've not seen it before.
Exactly, yeah. It'll be from the warmer places. Giving it, and that means that it actually has a little bit more kind of texture in the mouth. People kind of slightly describe it as a bit oily. That means that it works well with food. So yes, we had a white, but we had a bit more of a food-friendly white that kind of worked with quite richer dishes that we were getting through.
But we're not going to keep going with it into the chocolate cake we're just about to move on to, are we? That would...
No, I'm very looking forward to having some chocolate, but we're going to stop drinking this. Now, the reason being is because when you put something into your mouth that's sweet, the next thing that goes into your mouth is going to be we compare it in our heads very quickly, and it will suddenly taste, having been a really delicious wine with our food, but with the sweetness of the chocolate, it will suddenly taste really quite bitter and sour. And that's one of the reasons that there is sweet wines out there, pudding wines, dessert wines, on menus in restaurants and things, so that you can have a bit of sugar in the wines to match the sugar in your puddings.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Ben, what did you think of it?
Yeah, I liked it. It, like you say, it matched up with the richness of the food very well.
Good. Yeah.
And yeah. I would have Viognier isn't something that a grape that I'd heard of particularly. I think it sort of falls outside of the ones that if you maybe don't know so much about wine, it's not one that you'd have heard of as much.
Yeah, careful though, because it does have a little bit more alcohol than some of the others because of that hot country that it's grown in.
It's okay, no one has to be up in the morning ever, so that's all fine.
A lot of people ask me about the value and how much they should be spending on wines. So I just want to ask Ben, actually, how much do you think this wine, or I would have paid for this wine, how much do you think it's worth, the bottle?
I am going to say £16.
Ooh, went high.
I gambled.
Yeah, it's actually a tenner.
Oh. There we go.
Yeah, so really, really good value that we get from the south of France, the Pays d'Oc, from grape varieties that aren't as popular. Again, I always think you get a bit more value for money because the demand possibly isn't quite as high.
Compared to something like a Sauvignon Blanc.
Exactly, yeah. They will always probably try and put a little bit more on because they can. Margin, that is. Yeah, and I always think that's a really good price point to go for. It does seem quite a lot more than what the national average spend is, which is £6 now. But there are several reasons as to why I would always kind of spend around this much in the shops.
Cool. Well, thank you very much.
No, thank you.